powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets, take your profit, find out how. PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. Mike Gill, Adam Caplan from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast is here. We have plenty to discuss, including Nick Sirianni, who talked to the media today, Howie Roseman yesterday. Adam is live at the owners' meeting, which is down in beautiful sunny Florida. And, man, we got a whole bunch going on here, Adam, to dive into. I guess the weather down there is a whole lot nicer than it is here. I just left there, so I know where you are, and it's beautiful. So the heck with you, buddy.
Yeah, it is. It's Mike, good to be with you. Yeah, it is 80 today here in West Palm Beach, Florida, at the Breakers Hotel. It's great out here. Yeah, this is, in fact, Mike, they were supposed to have it here 2 years ago, but because of COVID, they didn't. And this is probably the third time in my time covering the National Football League that it is here. So glad to be here. I
bet you are. So a couple things that we can dive in on before we get to the Eagles. One of the Eagles' rules that was on the table today, that got passed. The Colts and Eagles passed a new overtime rule. They proposed a new overtime rule. It got passed today. Come playoff time, both teams, if the game goes to overtime, will now get the ball.
Yeah, and this one, I mean, there was so much momentum for it to pass, but as the league said, you never know until people have to start voting for it. So they got the recommended, or actually the needed 24 votes, and it got passed. And, look, there are two reasons, and they're both connected. The Chiefs overtime game against the Bills, we all love that game, no matter who you're a fan of. This is great football. How bad would it have been if that game would have ended on the first possession? And then you had, if you remember, where this all really started was the Chiefs-Patriots AFC Championship game in 2018, which was a knockdown, drag-out fight between Brady and Mahomes, and Mahomes didn't get the ball because the Pats scored first. So that's why this passed, and it's good. It's good for the fans. The league does a great job of understanding what's best, and we got at least 24 owners should pass it, and that's a good thing.
The Eagles also proposed another rule that Howie Roseman was not happy with. Teams can now block personnel executives from interviewing for roles with other teams. The Eagles got kind of poached a couple times by this rule. It's not going to happen now.
It's funny. Some people call it the Roseman rule, but they had, 3 or 4 other teams that agreed with this, just in terms of putting the proposal to vote. And it passed because the worst thing you can do is lose someone during the process that knows your draft board, your free agency board, and your draft board, and they have access to your information. But the thing that is, and we'll see if they make in the future the executive work until June 30th, because right when the draft's over is actually when personnel people generally leave within the first 10 days because their contract typically ends within 2 weeks after the draft ends. So I'd be surprised if any team would make anyone wait till June 30th, but it gives them time anyway. And look, this passed, and I think as Mike, you and I have talked before, when Brandon Brown left and Ian Cunningham left, the Eagles weren't happy about it. They liked those guys professionally, but they couldn't block them based on the revised rule from a couple years ago. But now the only guys who could leave before June 30th or anyone who wants to interview for a GM job, teams cannot block them.
Adam Caplan, Football at 4 at the owners' meeting. The owner will speak today at 5 o'clock for the Philadelphia Eagles. This GM, Howie Roseman, spoke yesterday. Let's dive into some of the things he said. Moshe and I talked yesterday. Both of us seem to like the Barnett move. The fans are saying why. I like it because, it seems like I don't hate it. Put it that way. I don't love it. I mean, Derek Barnett's a guy who gets penalized a lot, but for the price, I think it makes sense if he's not a starting player, if he's more of a rotational guy. And Roseman, they like Barnett more than the fans do. That's apparent.
Oh, yeah. It's although, it's interesting. On our message boards on Facebook or on YouTube, some fans actually understood what you just said. The latter part of it which was it's a depth move. It's not a lot of money. It's got a 1-year structure, which is what we thought it would be. We'll have the details for you. There's some bad information out there. We got the information actually last weekend, but we did not want to put it out because of the things we had to get confirmed. The structure is very unique. It's typical of Eagles, but they did some interesting language for his base salary, which is actually going to be less than it's been reported. but there's a reason for it. It's a very unique structure, which I've not seen them do before. We'll get into that. We'll explain it. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, it's a move where they can get out after 1 year without very little penalty, and that's why you bring him back. And he's a depth guy, rotational guy, and it's not going to exclude them from drafting at the end in the first round. In fact, if the board lines up for it, they're going to draft at the end of the first round. That'll happen.
I would say I would follow up with Derek Barnett doesn't preclude them now from saying, hey, we want to bring in another edge guy. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly where I see it going. But again, it has to be where their board lines up. You can't just take a DN because you need one. They have depth now, but they don't have other than Hassan Reddick. They need more pass rushers. They need more high-end pass rushers. What they need.
Now Sirianni doubled down today, and he said he's tough, he's competitive, he's got high football IQ, he's got high character, and he loves football. Man, I love Derek Barnett. Sirianni really, the pitch man for Derek Barnett, huh?
This was a little strong for some people. Let's be honest about it, based on the mental errors that he's had, the bad penalties, and so forth. So yeah, I understand the angst after those comments were made this morning. Here between 7:45 and 8 a.m. That was look. Nothing surprises me with what he says anymore. The comment about Quez Watkins could be his best number 2, and they tried to trade for Calvin Ridley, and they tried to send Allen Robinson. So I get it. He's trying to be positive, but look, he's got to play well. Derek Barnett knows it. He knows that they can get out of the contract after 1 year, so he's got to bring it, and he's got to be way more consistent. That's the thing. He's a flash player. He's just not consistent enough guy.
Adam, yesterday, Howie said he kind of downplayed their ability to sign free agents, and he kind of said, well, we brought back a lot of our own guys. That's part of our free agent, offseason. You buy that.
Well, it's true, and also they extended a lot of players. These are guys that they would have paid a lot more money if they became free agents. Or, some other guys got deals and they have to pay more. So, yeah, that's part of it. That's true. I'll back him on that. But the fact of the matter is, as we outlined, you're pretty clearly, there were guys, Marcus Williams and others, that they tried. Allen Robinson, they were in on deep on. They just didn't get him. Yeah. And the reasons for that, it happens, but they were going to be aggressive. We made it pretty clear coming out of the comment, this is something that they were going to do. They don't control the result. They control the effort, and they did their best effort on there, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, and, you look at the fact that wide receivers, is it the perception that wide receivers didn't want to play here? Is that fair?
I think it's more about what we had outlined on our previous show, Mike, which dropped on Monday, is that I do believe that some of the agents we spoke to at the Combine said that the Eagles are really a running offense. And we saw that since week 6, most rushing attempts in the National Football League. That's not what receivers are looking for. They want the ball. They want more targets. And ironically, that's what the head coach and general manager talked about the last 2 days, how their top guys need more targets.
Right.
Found that to be interesting.
Well, on Monday, you're right, Roseman talked about developing the offense around the quarterback and that he wants the offensive talent to get more pass targets. So they're trying to get that out there to receivers, I guess. And then today you have Nick Sirianni saying that he believes in these wide receivers. So they're trying to get the message out there that, hey, we want more targets. And then Sirianni says, well, we believe in the guys that we have here.
That was interesting. It's funny how they both said the same thing. Look, you've got the first-round pick in Smith from last season. They try to get – there might have been another receiver other than Allen Robinson. We know they had talks about Juju Smith-Schuster, but it was not really serious. But it just tells you that they're going to do something in the draft, and they're going to have to throw the ball more. 24.6 attempts per game starting week 7 is just not acceptable in today's NFL. We get why they did it. That's the best way to win, and that's good coaching. But going forward, it just can't be the case. It's not today's NFL, and that's not going to happen. And look, if the quarterback can't handle it, there's going to have to be changes.
Right. Well, I guess that question goes to, was the offense changed based on the quarterback's inabilities, or was it changed on the offensive line's strengths or the wide receivers' deficiencies?
It's the quarterback. It was not working throwing the ball 34.6 times per game over the first 6 weeks, most of the National Football League. It wasn't going to work. And I give the head coach credit. Mike, we know it's all coming. It was kind of shocking. I mean, as you know, we've talked for years about how much this team likes to throw the football, and this is not their ID. This is not their identity. And it's going to change. It's just a matter of how much it'll change. Well, because they dropped, as you know, 10 times per game, Mike, almost.
Yeah. First 6 games of the year. First 6 games of the year, they attempted almost 35 passes, and the rest of the season, almost 25 passes. So that dropped significantly there. GM Howie Roseman Monday said he wants their young players playing. That's another reason why they weren't as active in free agency. They want guys on the field. They don't want them to waste their first year. So does that give you – are you buying that in terms of which direction they might go in on draft day?
To me, it's going to – well, as I said earlier, I think you're looking at Deanne. Again, if the board matches up, if the best player there is receiver, and again, if they keep all three, you're looking at Deanne, you're looking at receiver, you're looking at corner. But it just depends. We're a little bit early for this, but it just depends what their draft board looks like. We usually find out 2 or 3 weeks ahead of kind of what they're looking at, and then we find out like 24 hours before. Okay, here we're going to limit it to these guys. Right now, I just go by position. If they keep the 3, which I still think is slim, but if they do, you're looking at DN, receiver, and corner, and that's the question: will those type of guys be there?
Right, and, they bring Barnett in, so people are starting to say, well, they're not going to go defensive end. You've already said you don't agree that would, make them not take an end. I would agree with you there. And I guess they have Kaiser White they brought in on Saturday, and then some people say, well, I guess they're not taking a linebacker. Are you still in that camp?
Actually, it's funny. I was always in that camp. They're not taking a pure linebacker in the first round. That's not happening. It's been 43 years since Jerry Robinson, who, by the way, is a pretty good football player out of UCLA, who obviously had a connection to Dick Vermeil, but no, that's not happening. Now, in the second round, could they take a hybrid guy, linebacker, pass rusher? Sure. Again, they have 10 picks. So in the first 60. So something can happen. Absolutely in the second round. But see, here's the thing with Barnett. Let me get back to Barnett here. What Barnett buys you is time. If they don't get that upgrade, because it's about upgrades, it's not getting what you already have. If you're going to draft a DN, it's got to be better than what you have. Eagles don't have depth, but they don't have high-end pass rushers other than Reddick. So if they feel that when they look at their board, there's an upgrade there, they're going to do that. That's going to happen at those 3 positions. Corner, which they don't have a number 2 corner right now, by the way. That's something that's kind of the story of free agency now. They just haven't filled it. And receiver, they need someone to play opposite Devontae Smith. We already outlined what they've tried to do there. And then DN, they need an upgrade.
Well, corner, let me ask you about that, because Sirianni mentioned about all these young corners. Now, last year, Adam, we were talking into August about who's going to be the number 2 corner, and they finally went and got Steve Nelson after waiting till, pretty much into the preseason. Is this going to be the same conversation? Who's going to be that number 2 corner, or do they legitimately like one of those guys on the roster?
It's not their intent to go with one of those guys. They're all back-end corners. None of them are starters. McPherson was a 4th-round pick. Is not a starting quality corner at this point. The other guys are in the mix for a roster spot. So, no, they're obviously going to draft a corner if it lines up. It just, if the guys who they like are gone, you don't reach for anybody. You don't believe who's an upgrade. But, no, they will absolutely address that in the first or second round. Again, if their board lines up, if that's the guy, their best player on the board, they're taking a corner. Absolutely.
Sirianni said today that it's important to, quote, feed our guys that are making plays. Now, that sounds great in theory. You got to throw the ball. Do they have that guy? Do they have a high-volume pass catcher on this team, a guy that you can feed?
Well, Smith had well over 100 targets. That's what the GM said as well. But, yes, Dallas Goedert, he needs to get the ball more. He had some drops. He fights the ball every once in a while, but he's very gifted. He needs to get the ball more. But the thing is, Quez Watkins, here's the question with Quez Watkins. Can he be an 80 to 90 target season guy? It doesn't look like that, but he certainly made a big jump last season. He went from a guy who was an absolute non-factor, who didn't have a great offseason, to having an excellent training camp after the first week and good preseason and really, really interesting regular season. I get Sirianni liking him a lot, but again, based on the fact that they went after Calvin Ridley, and we know how that, why they didn't get him. He would have been an Eagle if not for the gambling issue. And they tried, we're told, very strongly on Allen Robinson. So clearly they wanted someone who could handle more targets. This lines up with what they said. They clearly are going to try to do some of the receiver. But again, it looks like, it depends on what their board looks like.
Well, I agree with that. Do you feel that they're looking to draft a receiver, or are you more anticipating them making a trade for a guy?
I wouldn't rule out a trade. Not that these are related, but how about Pete Carroll once again using the DK Metcalf? It's not our intent.
Yep.
It's just like with Russell Wilson. I mean, now remember, we're not hearing anything on Metcalf right now, but think about this. This is the same team that would not draft him early because of medical issue with his neck. Is what we were told at the time.
Right.
So what would change now? Now, he's had no issues, and this is his fourth year, and the Seahawks want to extend his contract. But the Seahawks typically wait till the summer to extend players. So that's why there's not a lot of urgency to get this deal done right now.
Yeah, well, if you listen to Seattle radio, Adam, they think they're going to trade DK Metcalf. They kind of agree that they think Metcalf's going to get moved. So that's something to certainly keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's Devontae Parker in Miami. I guess that he would be another name that could be moved on draft day.
Yeah, well, look, he's super expendable. They just don't have room for him. I mean, they could afford him if they have to, but
right.
the three top spots on their depth chart are taken. You're not going to play $7 million a year for a guy who's going to be a fourth receiver. They're not going to cut him, so he's got to be moved. And I would agree, they'll do what they can to move him by the draft. And I guess it was reported with the Miami Herald, I think, that the Eagles have interest. It would make sense, but for them to get a decent pick, they need a lot of teams involved because teams know that they have to get rid of him.
All right, real quick, I want to ask you this question. I did a show this morning, and the comment of the Hurts' next contract came up. Okay,
mm-hmm.
When you talk about the market for quarterbacks, and the host said essentially that when Hurts is up for a new deal after next year, he would be in the $30 million a year range. Does that sound ridiculous?
Well, first of all, he's got to play well. He hasn't played well to even earn an extension. So, no, again, this is only his second full year starting, Mike, so we need to be careful. But let's get there. It's not even worth discussing because he needs to have a good year for them to even discuss it. It's not even being discussed or even considered at this point. That's kind of where it is.
Oh, I agree with you there. I'm just like with that number, even let's say he plays equal to what he did this past year, like, and then they have to
Won't
start.
be good enough. Won't be good enough.
Okay, but would that be the number of a middle-of-the-road quarterback? Is that a number for a middle-of-the-road guy?
Yes.
Wow, jeez.
Yes. Because remember, Derek Carr's deal was $25 million 4 years ago. Okay,
yeah.
He's a solid quarterback. Okay, he's a solid quarterback. Is Jalen Hurts, if he plays top 12 to 14 quarterback, that's a $30 million quarterback, but he hasn't even remotely played close to that. So, but again, at least he's going to be in the same offense. Let's give him a little credit here. He needs to play in the same offense 2 years in a row, which he barely has done in his career. So let's see what kind of jump he makes, then we'll talk about it.
Was just an eye-opening number, right? I mean, just to hear like, hey, if he plays,
that's where these quarterbacks are, though.
Oh,
yeah. That's where.
When you hear it, though, it's like, wait a second. Like if he just plays equal to what he did last year, I mean, he had a pretty good number. Made the Pro Bowl. Numerically, had a pretty solid year. And when he gets to the end of the year, he might say, hey, you know what? You got to start thinking about me.
Well,
if you're starting at 30,
here's the problem, Mike. There are numbers and there's tape. The tape was very underwhelming. There's no way to defend it because the tape is the tape. It can't be argued against.
Yeah.
So it wasn't good enough. It was bottom 10 to 12 as a passer. It's not acceptable. And it'll never be acceptable by the Eagles organization. They want to pass the football. I give Sirianni credit for scaling it back, but it's not going to work going forward.
All right, Adam, first public comments by Jeff Lurie since, January of last year, I think?
Yeah, 5. I will be there. Yeah, I will definitely be there. The Eagles made me aware of it last night. They asked me if I want to go. I said, sure.
Yeah,
so I'll be there.
If you raise your hand and get called on, what's your question for Jeff Lurie?
I got to cut. You know, it's funny, Mike. I haven't attended his thing probably in 5 years. I'm kind of fascinated. I'm a little, I don't look at it like everyone else does. I look at his career. I've gotten to know him a little bit. So, yeah, I'd like to see what he thinks about the quarterback position because I know how he wants a franchise quarterback. I know how it means to him. But also his movie career and how this intertwines with football. Very curious to see how that happens for an NFL owner because he's, other than I think one of the Giants owners, are really not involved in the movie business and how they're intertwined.
About 40 minutes, the owner will speak. Adam Caplan. We'll talk to him later on in the week. And we'll see if Howie Roseman has anything else up his sleeve between now and then. Adam Caplan from the owners' meeting. Go back and enjoy the weather, pal.
Sounds good, man. Thanks.
All right, Adam Caplan, InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.